I was posting and praying at the start of the year, just relying on inbound inquiries, not doing outreach as much. And when I did it, it wasn't effective. So there was a skill set piece there and a strategy piece there for sure. But I was avoiding it for a long time and not getting help on it because I didn't want to feel like a failure. I didn't want to address that fear that I had there. I didn't want to address that feeling of not being enough. And so it was just
Right.
easier to avoid it and stay busy, stay busy writing content, commenting on people's posts, doing all the things that everyone else told me I should do. And I didn't address that feeling because I didn't want to feel it. It's uncomfortable to feel this stuff. And so then
Yeah.
we kind of maintain these cycles of self-sabotage.
Today we're going to be talking about mindset, how mindset affects your growth in business, and in this case, in using marketing, LinkedIn marketing for business. And we have today Dan Bentley.
I think that whatever I say about Dan is not going to cover like even 5% of the basis. So before we actually get into it, Dan, what are people going to walk away from this masterclass with?
Good question. Hopefully, a deeper sense of self-awareness, a deeper sense of how important it is to reflect on the way we're thinking and feeling. This idea of metacognition, to think about how we're thinking. I think many people are often just so in what they're doing, going from moment to moment without a lot of space to really consider the intention behind what they're doing. And so maybe this will also be a chance to slow down and to think about where we're giving our attention and how that may be serving us and also how it may not be serving us. And to also have an idea of how our inner work, the inner process that we're all going through to a certain extent, consciously or unconsciously, has an effect on our external results, right? Our ability to show up for our work, our ability to create more work, and our ability to really serve our clients to the best of our abilities.
Absolutely love that. I'm sure that we're going to get into the why as a part of the equation of how mindset affects how successful we are. But before we get into that, can you say a couple of words about your journey and your why of being a coach? Because like you've got quite a few things in your recent history, going from music through a severe health diagnosis, maybe just like a couple of words of what motivated you to do exactly that of all things that you could have done.
Sure, I will try and summarize that crazy journey of the last few years into some kind of cohesive tale. So I started out my kind of professional journey, let's say, as a business consultant. I graduated with a business degree and I went to work for Accenture, a big international consultancy firm. And after a kind of year or two of that, I think approaching just before my second year, because I actually had to pay to leave, which is something I talk about. They talk about the golden, what do they say, golden handshake, but actually it's golden handcuffs, right? Because it keeps you there for a certain period of time. So I actually had to pay some money to leave. But I just got to the point where it just didn't feel aligned anymore. And I went to Ibiza to pursue music. It's something I did as a teenager, but kind of neglected it when I went into the world of like studying business and whatnot. And during that process, I started to figure out where I felt my music would be more appreciated and more suitable. And whilst I earned some good money playing kind of weddings and private concerts, where I really felt that I was able to offer something more than just a soundtrack, like an actual space for people to reflect on themselves and how they're feeling and thinking about, their life and what they want, was in plant medicine spaces and also on yoga retreats. So these areas where people were going to like do some deep reflection and deep inner work, that's the kind of place that I really loved playing music. So that was kind of my first taste of being around people that were actually doing some work on themselves. And that kind of kick-started a lot of internal reflection on my own journey and going through different types of therapy, different types of, personal work, personal growth. And that kind of really planted a seed. So 3 years into that journey, 4 years into that journey of doing music full time, I tripped and I hurt my back. And long story short, I developed this condition called functional neurological disorder, FND. And it basically completely changed my life to the point where I had to rely on carers. I couldn't play music anymore. I couldn't cook for myself. I couldn't dress myself. I couldn't really walk at all without aids. And I had to spend many months in the house not being able to go outside. And so I was really, as you can imagine, distraught by what was happening. It was very, it was a very emotional time. And I was like, what am I going to do? You know, I was kind of surviving off some savings and some support from the government at this point. I'd moved away from Ibiza back to London to be closer to, support services. And a friend of mine went through the coaching certification program with a company called Mindful Talent, and I applied for their kind of grant scheme. And after the second time of asking, I was successful. And then it started to grow from there. I was doing a lot of work on myself, and as time went by, my health improved, and it's much better than it was now. Still a ways to go. But the interesting part of that journey was that I was learning a lot about how to support myself through thinking about what I wanted to create using all different types of tools like coaching and visualization and mindfulness and goal setting and all these different techniques. EFT is a modality that I trained in this year too, which is great at releasing trapped emotion. And so all of this stuff that I started to learn about me and to support my journey then became the tools that I would use with clients. And what was really interesting is that as I started to do more of the coaching work, I would work with more creative people. So I was then able to kind of pull on my experience as being like a freelance musician and business owner, self-employed business owner, but also arcing back to my degree and my time as a business consultant. So it was really interesting that this thing that I kind of pushed away from, the business consultancy work that I did in my early 20s that I really didn't feel aligned with, roll on 10 years, it's actually integrating into my life and into my work in a completely different way. So, which is why I like this term holistic business coaching, because it's about supporting the whole individual, right? And not just thinking about how they can make more money, but how can they grow as a person so that they can start to have more of what they want in their life, be that better relationships, be that more money, right? Be that better health.
So you feel that even though you let go of that part of your life, that experience came back to help you and to do the work you're doing now organically.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I think there's just always been this kind of like really, I've always been connected to like entrepreneurship and business. Like my dad and my grandfather had a business when I was growing up selling, they sold parts for like VW. So they'd buy these like old cars that were all broken and they'd take all the parts off them and sell them. And I would go there and help them do that on a weekend and wash the cars down. So at a young age, I was involved in their business and earning money. And so that kind of, yeah, that ability to kind of like earn my own money and take care of myself through my skills, even though I was just, washing cars and stuff. But it was still very empowering. And that stayed with me through the whole journey, really. I'd always been, when I left Accenture, I was self-employed until now. So yeah, it was really interesting how that kind of started to integrate in a different way.
These days, entrepreneurship is so different. I mean, everything is just at our fingertips, and LinkedIn is a great example of that, right? So now are just there on LinkedIn. We can create content and reach hundreds and thousands of people instantly. So everything is so accessible. But I feel like back in those days, it was almost like entrepreneurship was more elitist in a way. Like those who were built for it would go through all the hurdles and they would just do it. But nowadays, it's so easy, so accessible that most people wouldn't have done it years ago, are faced with mindset issues. Because I mean, yeah, now it's so easy. Technically it's easy, but then psychologically it's not that easy, is it?
No, I agree with that. Like, depending on who you listen to on social media, right? You would think if you took the average of like what's popular, you would come away thinking entrepreneurship is easy, right? It's like, oh, just do this thing and you'll make like 10 grand next month. And it's just like, have you actually tried that? It's not that easy. Yeah, like I'd start like giving up so many times, right? Because it's easier to go and get a job. Like this idea that, oh, just leave your 9 to 5 and have time, financial and location freedom just overnight. There you go. And it's just like, no, that's not it. It's not for everyone, And that's not to say it's better or worse. It's just different. We need to like reflect on our own values of what's important, because there's definitely like a whole different set of challenges that come with building a business that a lot of people don't talk about because they're trying to sell you their course on how easy it is to do it. And that's certainly not been my experience. It's certainly been very hard, um, and that's okay, right? Like it's okay that it's hard, but to go into it knowing that there's going to be challenges, and that's why the mindset stuff's really important, because it's easy to get knocked around and to feel a lot of emotions, especially like with the people I work with that are solopreneurs, self-employed, freelancers, founders, etc. We often get into businesses that we really care about. And so when things don't go well, or someone says no, or someone asks for some changes to the work we've done, or a client doesn't get the results that we hope that they get, or a piece of content doesn't go well, or whatever the kind of quote unquote failure is, if we're not really aware of how we're feeling, or how to kind of be more emotionally resilient and deal with our feelings, should I say, it can be really tough. It can be really tough, and it can take its toll on our system, and that makes it harder to kind of bounce back. I think it's it's really it's really easy to take things personally in this game, because we care about it so much, and there's a real cost to that. And it's not about being really impersonable with our work, because it's important to show ourselves and to be vulnerable and open and all this stuff. But yeah, that's why the inner work is important, so that we can kind of be aware of how we're feeling and not have our own emotional well-being be so entwined with the success or failure of our business. And it's not easy. Like, it's not easy to do that, but I think it's important.
I totally see what you're saying, and I agree with you 100%. And I also feel like nowadays, especially the millennial generation, for some reason, we seem to be putting so much of our identity into our work, like our business or our profession or whatever we do for a living. And if that's not going well, feel like a personal, like a failure, like 100%. But I really want to ask you this one, Dan. I've never ever met someone who has actually turned around to me and said, you know what, I think I have a mindset problem. So to me, it feels like most people have a very, very low level of awareness when it comes to mindset hurdles and mindset blockages. So, in your opinion, in your practice, what are some of the most common symptoms that there is something in a person's mindset that's actually holding them back?
Yeah. Because there's so many things like that come to mind there. First off, I want to say that most people aren't aware that their problem is rooted in themselves. And I think that's because many of us don't want to like look, you know, underneath, and we're scared of what we might find. To really deal with stuff at the core, that is sometimes important. And yeah, most people don't have that level of awareness. And this is why I still pay people to help me, right? Because I've not got it all figured out. I can see in others what they can't see, but likewise, I can't see in myself what I can't see. But key things that come up in conversations of mine, we touched on this before. Perfectionism is obviously a big one. Procrastination is a big one. All these different kind of flavors of self-sabotage, right? Fear is another one. Fear of rejection, fear of judgment, fear of success even. I've had a little bit of that recently. Like, things are going really well now. Like, what if they stop going really well? Or what if I can't keep this up? What if I can't handle this? There's many, and they all show up in different ways. But there's some common ones that I notice, like day in, day out, and just how people talk about themselves. A lot of people are generally very hard on themselves. I noticed that language come up quite a bit. People sell themselves short. I guess like another way of explaining it is like when people think they've got a problem with growing their business, sales, whatever it might be, and it's like, well, what's stopping you from actually solving that problem? And often it is fear, often it is doubt. Like, you have the best strategy in the world, but like you've still got to implement it, right? And you've got to implement it over the long term. And there might be a long time that you're implementing that where you're not getting the results that you want. And how do you feel about that? And that's when a lot of that stuff can come up around self-doubt.
But the hard part of all that you said is actually spotting it, which I think is where Dana was going with the question, right? identifying
How do you
it.
spot it? Yeah.
Yeah. No, because most people who procrastinate, they're actually very aware of the fact that they procrastinate. They're also aware of the fact that, for example, I've not been able to raise my prices for quite a while because I'm feeling this resistance to it, but I don't feel like most of them are going to jump to the conclusion like I have a mindset problem sort of thing. But
Yeah.
you did mention something very interesting that I definitely want to go into in more detail just a little bit later on in conversation about selling ourselves short. But before that, what exactly is self-sabotage? Like, where does it come from? Because it sounds very counterintuitive. Why would you ever want to sabotage yourself?
Yeah, it's a good question. Why? Depending on like the flavor of self-sabotage that comes up, I think the answer is different, but like it often loops back to something way back in our past, right? And it's interesting you bring up like these kind of levels of self-awareness, and I think that is a big one here. Why do we self-sabotage? I think a lot of it is just to keep ourselves safe, right? To keep ourselves out of the unknown, to keep ourselves within our zone of comfort. It's scary to step outside of that, right? It's scary to kind of go out into a place that we're unfamiliar with, and there's a real cost of that. There's a cost of just staying where you are, and that's fine for some people, right? Some people are happy just staying where they are, but it's it's very common, and I think that's a big part of it. Yeah, staying safe.
Right. So I have something that is probably going to be hard for you to gauge a little bit, but from the people you've worked with who struggle to grow their business, do you know what the split has been in terms of the proportion of people who couldn't do it just because they didn't know what they were doing, their strategy was just very, very bad, and the people who couldn't do it because they had some mindset limitations?
That is hard because most of the people that I'm working with have come through my content or DMs, sales process, etc. So at that point, I've established that they've got a challenge that I can help them solve, which is more mindset than strategy,
Right.
even though I help some people with strategy. But like if I think of like what are the kind of general percentages out there, it's hard to answer. I'd say the majority is in favor of those needing to reflect on their mindset. Because like, for instance, if you speak to most people about their business right now, and if you said like, what's the one thing that you need to do more of in order to like make more money, improve your delivery, whatever it might be, let's just say make more money, because that's a lot of what we hear people talk about. It's certainly a problem I needed to solve this year, and a lot of people know what they need to do, they're just not doing it.
Right. So in a way,
Well,
it's a case of they know what they need to do, but they're just not doing it.
a lot of the time, yeah, a lot of the time they know what they need to do, they're just not doing it. And okay, there's a part of that, it's like, well, they're avoiding that task because they don't know how to solve it. And that's okay, right? Once we underline that and get some clarity on that. But then it's like, well, how much longer are you going to avoid it? How much longer are you going to procrastinate? And actually, like when we talk about procrastination and, self-sabotage, etc., it's like, well, what are you really avoiding now? Are you avoiding doing the task, or are you avoiding the feeling that you're going to get when you actually have to do that task? So for me, I was, posting and praying at the start of the year, just relying on inbound inquiries, not doing outreach as much. And when I did it, it wasn't effective. So there was a skill set piece there and a strategy piece there for sure. But I was avoiding it for a long time and not getting help on it because I didn't want to feel like a failure. I didn't want to address that fear that I had there. I didn't want to address that feeling of not being enough. And so it was just easier to avoid it and stay busy, stay busy writing content, commenting on people's posts, doing all the things that everyone else told me I should do. And I didn't address that feeling because I didn't want to feel it. It's uncomfortable to feel this stuff. And so you kind of maintain these cycles of self-sabotage because it's easier to stay where we are, right? Until it's not.
That's a very important one you touched on, the busyness, that we keep ourselves busy, that it's a way of convincing ourselves that we're doing something, but it's not the right thing. And we know that it's not the right thing. And it's not taking us where we want to go. But we feel like, okay, I'm doing it. I'm working. Because yeah, if you're busy like at work working for someone else, at the end of the month you're still gonna receive your paycheck. But if you're an entrepreneur, if you have your own business, it doesn't matter how busy you are. You're not going to be paid for being busy. You're going to be paid for doing the right things.
Right.
And the more of the right things you do, the more you get paid, right?
Exactly. Yeah. And I think it's being okay with the fact that when you start doing those things that you know you need to do that you've been avoiding, you might not be so good at them at the beginning, right? There's a reason you've been avoiding them. You've got to face that feeling, that emotion, which is not often comfortable. You know, on a call that I had when I started working with someone, they were like, "You're just not very good at signing clients online. You're just not very good at it." I was like, I had to sit with that feeling, you know. Before
Yeah.
we started working on the how, I had to sit with that feeling and understand that and reflect on that and be with it and not just push it away. And it really helped, you know. And yeah, it is just so easy to be busy, but like I say, there's a cost to that, and the cost is you don't address the most important thing, the biggest challenge, and it gets bigger and bigger and bigger because it's just not getting the attention it needs, you know. It's like the last thing on the to-do list. You
Yeah.
finally get to it and you're just wiped out because you've done all the other stuff and you feel good for doing all the other stuff. Ah, that can wait. Do it tomorrow. Then you don't deal with it until your back's against the wall and you really have to. And that happens a lot with people's health. This is what I was talking about before. Like I dealt with a lot of like emotional stuff and physical stuff and my diet and nutrition when I really needed to because my health was so bad. But like, does it really need to get that bad, you know? Does it really need someone to have, you know, a really serious health condition before they address their health? Does it have to be true that we really need to like reach rock bottom in our business until we take action and go and invest in that coach? And
That's
often
a
like
very interesting question you ask.
often for some people it really does need to get to that, but like what's the cost
Yeah.
of that, you know? Like days, years of being in that place, you know? That stuff is important.
There's an entrepreneur author who I started reading his books early in my journey. His name is MJ DeMarco, and he calls it the F this event. It's like he says until you find your, like he shortens it to the FTE, the F this event, right? Until you find your FTE, you're not gonna do enough. You're not gonna change your mindset. You're not gonna get hit to be focused enough on what matters. You know, I don't know if it has to be like this for everyone, but I noticed that one of my problems early on was that everything was so easy. I was too comfortable.
Mm,
Dan, this story that you brought up about yourself, you know, keeping yourself busy and not doing the thing because you had to face a very uncomfortable feeling. I'm sure that everyone can resonate with that. We've all been there, but I'm just very curious where exactly this comes from because rationally speaking, if you've never ever done outreach before, you can't possibly expect yourself to be good at outreach, right? So, you know, if we look at this from a rational point of view, you should be able to tell yourself, okay, I don't know how to do that. I have no idea what I'm doing. I'm just going to give it a go and see how it goes. But we don't do that. You know, we go into these things with this huge expectations of, yes, I'm just going to go into it and just completely smash it. And then when we don't, we get really disappointed in ourselves. And essentially, probably this fear of being so disappointed in ourselves is what's stopping us from doing it. But to me, it all starts from these really unrealistic expectations. Like, why are we expecting ourselves to just know everything?
yeah, that's a good question. I think it's different for everyone, but there is a real cost to having such high expectations. Absolutely. Bringing in more of a kind of mindset of experimentation to it is useful. Now, this is something that really helped me. And a sense of playfulness, right? I think it's just could be a lot of the time we just take it too seriously, you know? Like when my health went downhill, like it really reframed everything for me. And it's not to say that I'm always just light and bubbly now. I'm not. Like I still have my moments, but I've definitely got a different framing now. It's like, yeah, like it's important to try and grow my business and whatnot. And I'm going to try this thing and maybe it doesn't work, but like if it doesn't, it's like, okay, let's learn from that, you know? I guess it's like, you know, growth versus fixed mindset to a certain extent. Let's not be too down on ourselves if it doesn't work and try and figure out why it didn't work and learn from that and move forward.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. I remember my mum said, like, my mum doesn't talk philosophically much at all, right? But there's something that she said when I was really young, which is like expectations lead to disappointments. And it's probably been said by many, many people over the years, but it really stayed with me from quite a young age. And the loftier these expectations we have on the outcome, the more charge it has, and we're kind of setting ourselves up for failure because that it might not reach that outcome that we set, right? It probably won't for a while. And it's being okay with that, having a bit of grace, having a bit of patience with ourselves, with the process. And yeah, focusing on the inputs, not the outputs, right? Like it's okay to have a vision and it's great to have that as a place to get to. But I love this idea of a vision being a place to come from, not a place to get to, right? Really spinning it around. So it's like, okay, I want to like make more money, have more clients, improve my delivery, grow my brand. But who do I need to be right now today in order to create that realization, that eventuality? In my journey, that's been really helpful to take away the pressure of the expectation. Like I'm just going to
That's really
show up.
powerful. This is very, very
Yeah,
powerful. Just show up. Just to show up without all these expectations that we create for ourselves. Definitely.
Yeah, and that's the
yeah,
attitude that is is going to get you to start creating those habits, the daily habits that will take you to that one destination.
yeah, exactly. Because it's like, in Atomic Habits, the most powerful takeaway for me was, well, there's a few, well, there's many, right? It's a great book and it was really popular for many reasons, but the shift in identity has been the central part to creating long-standing habitual change, right? It's like who we really think we are on a deeper level. So I'm not like a guy that runs, I'm a runner, for example, right? I'm not someone that's just practicing the guitar. I'm a musician, and really framing ourselves in that way. And I think that's what comes through when you share that. And that's what comes through when I use that phrase of vision as a place to come from. It's like really shifting our identity is really important to embed those habits and keep us going for the long run.
There's something I read many years ago that I've to this day I still think about it a lot, and I think it's something that keeps us blocked. It sets ceilings for almost all of us when we start building a business, which is the fact that we usually attribute a value to ourselves, a price, as in. So, for example, if I was working for a company and all my life, my average salary was 2,000 euros, let's say, then that's the price that I attribute to myself. So
Mm,
when I get out of it and I start to build my own business, that's the first ceiling I will encounter revenue wise. The one that I think that's all I'm worth it. I'm only worth those 2,000 because that's what people have been paying me so far. I would like to know your take on that, and how would you break the ceiling? Like, how do you convince yourself that you're not limited to that? To that.
it's a really good question. The first thing that was coming up when you started asking that, started talking about that idea, was people charging based on their worth, right? Like charge your worth is a phrase that I hear all over social media, and I don't like it. It's like charge your worth, like how much are you worth? I'm worth 2,000 euros a month. Like really? Like that's your worth? Like charging based on the value that you offer, right? On the value that you can deliver, the transformation that you can deliver. So I think that's like an important reframe there around our work and our kind of personal sense of self-worth, right? And I think when we start to kind of like blur those boundaries, it sets us up for failure in many ways because it's like, well, if someone says no to that price, whatever it may be, how does that feel about us, right? Like that's what I mean, like when it's so entwined. Another idea that I found really helpful for that from a book by Stephen Pressfield, The War of Art. Don't know if you've come across that. Really great book for it's kind of targeted at artists and creatives, but anyone can learn a heap from that book. And he has a concept with regards to like creatives putting a price on their work and them feeling because they enjoy it, they should charge less, and a lot of these kind of like these myths that float around, right? And he would say like, think of like yourself as like, for example, Dan Bentley Limited or Dan Bentley PLC, and then I'm just someone that works for Dan Bentley PLC. I'm not Dan Bentley PLC, right? And it's just kind of creating a bit of distance from us as a human being and us as an employer
Oh, I love that.
of the company that we work for. So I think like creating some space between, our sense of self-worth and our work is really important. And doing the work to bolster our sense of self-worth through inner work, through journaling, through whatever it might be, like understanding why we have those blocks around the way we see ourselves, really important. And then at the same time, to be able to think about the pricing from more of a kind of logical perspective rather than being really tied to like how we see and feel about ourselves and the limits that we've had in the past, right? Because, the past doesn't have to predict our future, right? We can charge more for our work in it, but it has to be based in the value that we can offer, not based on what we think and feel about ourselves as a human being.
This
I don't know
makes
if
a
that
lot of
answers your
sense,
questions.
Dan.
Absolutely. It's a very cool hack, that idea of creating the idea of you as a legal entity instead of you as a person. Also for the rejection side of it, right? So they're not saying no to me getting paid this amount, as they're saying no to that product that my company delivers.
Yeah, exactly. Because like if you work for a company and your price was, I used to work for Accenture. Like I was charged out at, even when I was an intern, I was charged out at like I don't know what it is now, £400 a day rate. Like that's a lot for someone that's not even got a degree. That's an intern. Maybe it was a bit less, but it was a lot. I remember thinking it was a lot, and that didn't affect me coming to work. I didn't like get at the end of my day and go, have I really earned my £400 today? Like that's taken care of at people like way above my pay grade. But like if I'm now showing up as that, it's like have I really earned that? There's way more stuff going on because I'm the individual and everything's tied to me. So I think the more space we can create from that, yeah, is important.
Yeah, for sure. And speaking about this already, you did say, beforehand that some people, especially when there is a mindset blockage, tend to sell themselves short, and we already kind of went through that. But I really want you to get into the clickbaity title that we had for the event, because we know that it's not clickbaity. And if you want to share this case study of that client who 5x their revenue after working with you, I'm just really curious how this whole thing went. What was this thing that was holding them back so much that after they resolved the problem, they were able to 5x whatever they were making before that. Do you mind sharing?
Yeah, that was someone I worked with, yeah, last year, or year before maybe now, and that was a really interesting case study because the clients that he went on to sign were actually not through. He still had a full-time job at the time. I think he still does, and he is a coach. And his challenge was feeling that because he had only just qualified, that he couldn't charge a certain amount of money. And the big reframe that we worked on there was like he'd been a senior leader in banking or insurance. I think it was in banking. And the idea that he was a new coach was in some ways true because he'd only just got this qualification. But in some ways, it was completely false because he'd been coaching for many, many, many years at a very high level, right? So it was kind of remembering like all of the stuff that he'd learned in his employed life had had massive utility, and he kind of like put that to one side and didn't count that. It's like, well, I've only just qualified, so I can only charge like by the hour, whatever it was, 60 quid an hour or something. And we worked on creating an offer, we worked on going through that process. And what enabled him to charge, I forget what it was, I think it was 2 grand, 1,500 quid or something like that, way more than he thought he would in his first, month of coaching, was because we remembered all of the stuff that he'd done in his job. And so a lot of the work was like going back to some of his conversations, going back to some of his kind of career highlights, going back to some stuff that had happened in his personal life, and it's like, wow, yeah, I've actually got a lot of experience of supporting people to create really deep transformation in their lives. And he went on to sign a few clients working with me, one of which he's still working with. So that 5x could probably be revised, right? Because that one client that he started with when we started working together is still going. Yeah, it was a lot around confidence, really realizing his worth, his strengths, his abilities, remembering all of this stuff that he'd done that he'd forgot about. And I think it's true of many of us. We don't look back, we don't celebrate our success. We're always on to the next thing, which is great in many ways, but it's like, well, it's also really important to remember all the good stuff that we've done so that we can bring a bit of extra motivation and confidence when we need it, when we're making that next leap and we might not feel ready for it because of all the stuff that's going on in our mind, right? And there's a place to deal with those blockages, but there's also a place to kind of remember everything that's got us to this point right now. And from a strategy perspective with that guy, I wasn't actually on LinkedIn at the time, but for him, it was actually just starting conversations with people that he knew and being confident enough to tell people what he did and how he helped people. And that's where that client came from. So it was actually nothing about social media. And again, that was about his strengths. He was great at creating conversations with people in the real world. And well, let's do more of that then, let's leverage your skills. And whilst it's really important to kind of realize where we're weaker in certain places and do our best to like improve those when needed, I think it's also really important to realize what we're good at and leverage that, and really max that out, because that's what often comes more naturally, this idea of being in your zone of genius, right? And that for him was creating conversations with people in the real world, not actually posting on social media. So there were some of the key takeaways, that helped him create those really, really fantastic results.
It's really, really deep.
So you helped him see his value and what he was good at in order for him to start leveraging that skill more.
Yeah, absolutely.
Would you say that there was a bit of a reframe as well from where he was to, in other words, what he did to what he was delivering? Because you touched on this before, and I think that's a very important one. In other words, what the person is receiving, so what the client is receiving instead of what you're giving. Because for us,
Right,
what
right.
we do is usually very easy, isn't it? Like it's just, yeah, I can do it. So just because I can write it in 5 minutes, it doesn't mean that it's worth only 5 minutes of my time, because it
Yeah,
has a
yeah.
lot of my skills that I forgot I had them. They're so natural to me.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. This is what happens with pricing as well, right? Like when people move from like an hourly rate to like more of a package rate or something, it's like, well, if you're just charging by the hour and you've got, I've got a client at the moment, they're a bookkeeper, and she's we just started together last week. She's charging by the hour, and she's got, I think, 10 plus years experience, 11 years, a lot, right? More than most. And so she's good now, and she's quick, and she gets the job done, and she's trusted. And it's like that counts for something. And you're going to keep charging by the hour when you're really good and you've been doing something for 10 years. It's like you kind of shooting yourself in the foot, right? 'Cause you're getting paid less technically because you're good. And it's like, well, actually, you should be getting paid more because you're good. Just because you can deliver it in a shorter time than the person over here that's just started, that shouldn't be held against you. But
I think that happens a lot with creatives.
yeah, 100%. And also this idea that, yeah, but if you enjoy the work, if you enjoy it, then you kind of lose track of the hours. Oh, I just enjoy it, so I don't count my hours. And the social expectation of like, well, you enjoy it, so you shouldn't charge as much. I had this when I was doing my when I first started in charging money for music in Ibiza for playing at people's weddings and stuff. It's like, okay, you're paying me an hourly rate, but like I've been practicing the guitar for like 20 years, to get this good that I can play it to the level that I was playing, right? There's that story of Picasso that has been changed many, many times, and I forget exactly what it is, but like someone walks up to me in a park or a cafe or something, right? And they go, oh, can you just draw us a little sketch? And he draws them a little doodle and charges them. He said that'll be $3,000 or euros, whatever the story goes. And she's like, why? It only took you 5 minutes. I was like, no, it took me 35 years to be able to do that, right? And like, whatever the truth was with that story, it paints an important point, which I think many of us can learn from.
Yeah, definitely.
It's one of the hardest parts, is to reframe that it's not what you do, it's what the other person receives. It's like there's
Right.
an interesting story I heard from Stephen Larson. I had a problem in my electricity in my house. The light went out, and I just hired an electrician to come. And he was like, so I just have to change the fuse. And it's like, so do it. Yeah, well, I don't, there's something I need that I don't, that it's gonna be. And he's like, the guy couldn't say it. It's like, how much is it gonna cost me. And he's like, yeah, I don't. And he's like, just tell me how much do I have to pay you. It's a bit expensive. It's like $90. And he's like, and he's looking at him. I don't care. I don't want to do it. I can't do it myself. So just do it. $90 is nothing. I make much more than that in an hour. It's the little things. Like, of course, for this guy, he cannot see the value of just changing the fuse for $90. It seems expensive for him. But if you're gonna do it for me, we always tend to do this. No, try to do it ourselves. So it's gonna be, but we never reframe it and think, but what if I was investing this time in what I do best? How much would I be earning instead?
100%. Yeah. 100%. I spoke to someone the other day, and she's a business owner, and she's like, I really want to get a cleaner. I just don't feel I can right now. It's like, how much, same conversation, like, how much does a cleaner cost? I don't know, 20, 25 an hour. What's your time worth? She was like, yeah, a lot more than that. It's like, well, based on a very simple ROI, is it worth it? Like, yeah, and you can keep playing with that idea. It's really powerful.
Yeah, sure.
There's something I would like to bring into the mix here. It's like, so LinkedIn, the most basic, we've spoken about this here. Dana has shared her and the blueprint strategy over here, which is effective. We know it works, and all you need is LinkedIn. You can book clients and deliver your service. It's very easy to do it. But I think there's a lot of mindset struggles there. One of them is in the outreach part of it. So reaching out to people and telling them, hey, look, I can do this for you. And you mentioned this in with your client situation. I can do this for you. So how do you like? But I speak for myself. I hate outreach. I've always been very shy. I don't like to talk about my accomplishments, about my achievements. I'm horrible at this, and that's why I focused. I'm a marketer because because I like to make people come to me because I can't go to them. So it's my defense mechanism. How do you reframe this? Like, how do you make someone, let's say that you're helping me in this case. I can't do outreach because I'm afraid. I would imagine this comes from a fear of rejection. I don't know.
Yeah, I think that might be true. One thing you were saying there too, talking about you and your accomplishments, and there's some kind of unease around that. But like outreach for me, and full disclosure, I worked with Ethan and Dana on this, and worked with Ethan for the first 3 months when I was really heavily figuring out how to do outreach. And it wasn't about, it's not about you and your accomplishments and what you can do. It's actually just being curious about the person I'm speaking to, trying to understand if they've got a challenge that I can help them with, and like really coming from that place of service. Like, can I help this person get to that next step, whether that's with me or someone else, right? And again, removing the idea that I'm trying to like get clients and just focusing on the inputs, focusing on starting the conversation and just trying to find out what they want and what's in the way. And if what's in the way is something that I can help with, just making an invitation for a call, right? And you're going to get people that like straight away when you mention goals or like how do you, sometimes I ask like what kind of projects do you love working on or what kind of clients do you love to work with? Just that word clients is enough for someone to go, I don't want anything you're pitching, this feels salesy. But that's a very small minority of the people. Like most people that have actually replied action. A lot of people are afraid of like coming across as salesy. And I mean, your thing, you said you might be afraid of people rejecting you. I mean, there's a deeper kind of piece of work there around that, right? That might be useful to uncover. But also, it's for me, it was just like getting the reps in.
Dan, you said something very interesting regarding people doing outreach and when they start mentioning the word clients to others and the other people start being very jumpy. What I noticed from doing really a ton of outreach is that if you are reaching out to people who have a very weird relationship with money, like weird mindset around money, they don't have much of it, they have to work very hard, or at least this is how they perceive it to get money, you're always going to get a really, really bad reaction. Like they're going to be like, what are you trying to do? Why are you pitching me? Like, what are you doing? Is this how you get your clients? You know nothing about me. Like, why are you doing this thing? Well, if you actually contact someone who is making money, they're not weird around money. If they need you, they'll just say so. If they don't need you, they'll be super polite and nice about it. They're going to be like, I see you. I know what you're trying to do. That's totally cool. I just don't need your service right now. And that's it. And this is said, like I did about, I don't know, probably over 300 reach outs to come to that conclusion. It was always the people that were really weird, like small businesses. They were putting too much of themselves in their work, and the outcome was never matching their effort, that had this reaction to me reaching out and asking where they need help.
Yeah, I think I don't know if everyone that's not responded well to my messages has got a money mindset problem, because I don't know them. Maybe I think it's a fair enough assumption to make. If someone has a really strong reaction to me asking a very normal question about what someone wants and what they think's in the way, like if I'm going to get a really strong negative reaction to that, I think it talks to a deeper challenge that they might be better dealing with, right? Around how they feel about themselves, about their business. So I think, yeah, there's probably some truth to that. I agree that those people that are more, let's say, successful, like financially in their business, they're aware that that's a process that many people go through, like sending messages to potential clients to seeing if they can help, and if not, great, no worries. But like, yeah, I think that's fair. Like any strong reaction to these kind of quite basic questions speaks to a deeper problem. I agree. Just before I forget on that, like one thing around outreach, and maybe it loops back to a little bit your point, Fran, but actually what we were getting to there is actually it's more about saying the number on a sales call than it was about outreach. It sounded like maybe we'll get into that more around kind of saying a number and the value and how it's connected with self-worth. And maybe that comes back to your earlier point around earning $2,000 in a corporate company, and then, okay, is that my limit going forward? But one thing that's helped me with outreach, apart from like obviously learning a lot about the actual skill of asking better questions through working with you guys, was the state that I'm in when I'm sending those messages. I think it can be felt, and if I'm not in a good place when I'm sending messages, I just don't do it now, or I go away and get myself into a good place. Like, I don't think we need to be the victim of our emotions. We can shift them by lots of different tools, moving our bodies, visualization, breathing, looking at our vision board or whatever it might be. We can shift that for sure. But if I'm not in that space, I either need to take a break or get myself into that space. Because when I'm sending messages and I'm either tired or I'm just not in a place of service and genuine curiosity or play or joy, and I'm not smiling when I'm sending the message, I think it comes across and I don't get the results. And I've tracked that. And I've seen that in the data. Those times that I've just pushed through, I just got to get a few more messages out today. It's just not worked. I've just not got the response. It's just not been felt.
That is such an undervalued advice. I feel like it's like that thing when you speak on the phone with someone and most people don't realize, but like that you can feel if the person's smiling or if they're not, right?
Yeah, agreed. And like this comes back to that vision being a place to come from. Like if I'm in a vision space of like, before I get on a sales call now, I'm looking at their profile, going through who they are, making a few notes about like something they've done recently, so I can build genuine rapport because I've taken them 5 minutes to find out what they're up to, and then I'm just really connecting. I'm just like, let me be in a place of service here, like closing my eyes and breathing. And whatever happens, let this person walk away having a really good experience of our conversation, whether they become a client or not, right? Let's put that to one side. It's like a bit of self-coaching, a bit of a prayer almost. Like, help me show up right now in this moment to really serve this person. And
It's beautiful.
again, it's like the shift in who I'm feeling right now affects how I speak, affects how I behave.
You can't say any of what you just said if you don't really feel it and mean it, because it's going to come across as just very, very artificial and phony.
Exactly. People feel that.
People sense that. Yeah, people sense that. We don't people give you don't give people
100%.
enough credit when it comes to that, but people can smell you from a mile away whether you're full of shit or you're actually genuine.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
How focused on target? The question is also just these 4 words. So
How
I don't know.
focused on target? Like, how focused am I on targets? Yeah, it's hard to know exactly what that question means, but like,
Yeah.
I'll say I come back to that kind of inputs versus outputs thing. Like, I'm not like really driven by a certain financial goal right now. I'm just focused on creating, 25, 30 conversation openers a week with people that I think I can help based on the people that have either connected with me, interacted with my content, or have accepted a connection request. That's my focus right now. The other target,
Right.
when I hear target, I hear numbers. That's the main number that I focus on. And then how many of those people that I actually get onto calls. The only other kind of target or goal that I'm really focused on right now is just improving my delivery and making that a bit more structured and easy for people to be enrolled more effectively, and making sure that I'm delivering on my promise. Because now, for the last few months, I've enrolled quite a few new clients, and that needs to now be my main focus. Yeah, it's hard to say much more without really fully knowing what the question was, but
But
hopefully
that's
that was
really
helpful.
good, actually. So basically, it's you know where you want to get, but now you forget about that. You know what you need to do to get there. So now you're focused on that, on those steps, and delivering on those steps consistently. Because I
Exactly.
noticed, for even for myself, that's one of the problems I've had throughout the years, is not being consistent enough. And this, I'm even afraid to use this word nowadays because everybody talks about consistency on LinkedIn.
Yeah,
But yeah, like you need to do it enough times in order to prove to yourself that it's either that.
absolutely. Yeah. And the thing with consistency that gets
Yeah,
missed out
that's
is like, well, be consistent with what, Be consistent with what? Commenting on people's posts? Like, maybe a bit,
exactly.
but
But
like
now you
not
said
that
it,
much for
you
me.
know where you want to get, and now you know the steps to get there, and you're just being
Exactly.
consistent on repeating those steps. So that's amazing.
Yeah, but it took me time and money and resources to find out what those steps were. And the steps that I really needed to be consistent on were the steps that I was avoiding for, a long time because of all the stuff we'd spoken about in this conversation. Yeah, two things I want to say to that. Like, one is, I think Hormozy talked about this metaphor, and it's like we're all trying to grow a tree, right? And the tree is our business. But what happens is we get all these branches that come off the tree, and maybe that's commenting on people's posts, maybe that's a webinar, maybe that's starting a newsletter, maybe that's running some ads, or whatever it might be for your business. And we get distracted by all these kind of half completed branches that are never kind of allowing the tree to grow because they're taking an energy away from the main thing that we need to be doing to grow our business. And for me, that was improving my content and doing outreach. Outreach was number one, right? And so all this other stuff was taking energy away from what I really needed to do, and actually cutting off all those branches and just going, right, for the next 2 or 3 months, all I'm going to focus on are these numbers around outreach that we are talking about, right? Starting those 25, 30 conversations a week. That's all I'm going to focus on when I get to my computer. And it was so freeing, right? All of a sudden I could just let go of all this stuff. A big misconception when people think about like moving forwards or working with a coach and what they're going to ask them to do. It's like, it's going to be too much. I don't know if I've got time for it. I don't know if I've got the energy for it. It's like, we're not talking about adding loads more stuff in. What you're doing right now is not working to get you to that next step. So we're actually going to get rid of all that stuff and focus on the really important thing that you've probably been avoiding for all these other kind of mindset reasons, and just do that thing and get really good at that thing, which is, my story of the last kind of, 3, 4 months or whatever it's been.
That's
But
really
one other
good.
thing I wanted to say, the other thing that encapsulates a lot of this, I think, with regards to like stuff that you've talked about around pricing, around selling, around whatever it is, for me with outreach and also with my health, and what I see a lot of on social media is like, it's so easy to point at stuff in the external world that we can't control, to take away our sense of responsibility and ownership. AI, the algorithm, the economy, the election, the government, the whatever, right? Just point out there and don't take it on. Taking responsibility, especially when it's really hard, is by far the thing that's had the biggest impact on my life, on my health as well. I'm reading Extreme Ownership at the moment by Joko Willink, is that his name? And some other guy, and it's like a hardcore Navy SEALs dude that's just like extreme ownership is how you become a good leader. For me, I call it radical responsibility. It just feels a bit softer, but also speaking to the same thing,
Oh,
right?
I
It's
like
like
that.
own your stuff, really own it and focus on what you can control. And I've had so many DM exchanges where people have like gone, "Ah, yeah, I've had a crap year because of like, AI and this and that." It's like, okay, do you know any other graphic designers that have had a really great year? Yeah, actually, I do. I know one or two. And I'll go, "Oh, what do you think they're doing that you're not?" And oftentimes they just won't respond. I like to play with that a little bit because it's like, it's confronting, we don't want to like accept responsibility. It's easier to
Just
blame,
provocative question.
right? I learned that one the hard way.
Yeah, it's the school of hard knocks, right?
Absolutely.
My closing question is, if you had to, and I feel like you already answered it, but if you want to sum it up, if you had to give one tip, like one mindset shift for people to start booking more clients on LinkedIn, what would that be?
Start more conversations. Absolutely. Start more conversations. I think the word outreach makes some people feel funny, but like just start more conversations, and actually being more specific and nuanced. After the first question to max, start moving it in a direction that's related to what you can offer and what you can help with. I see too many people getting stuck in small talk about the weather and Christmas and
That's very common.
holiday. Right, I did that for ages. That's why I thought it didn't work. Because I was just talking about, you know, crap. It's like build a bit of rapport. You only need a question or two to do that. And then actually start talking about things that you might be able to help this person with. I think what underlines that all is like, is kind of coming from the place of knowing that what you have has real value in the world, and it's our duty to find more people that we can help. And when you come at it from that place that we're really trying to serve here and help others, it really shifted things for me. Right? It's really selfish to keep what you've got and not share it with the world. Right? I like that idea of walking around a desert. Everyone's, dying of thirst, and you're walking around with this backpack on full of like the most pristine, beautiful, clear, abundant water, the most life-giving water you could imagine, and you're holding it all for yourself. You're not sharing it. It's like that's what a lot of business
And
owners are
you're just
doing.
thinking if the water is good enough for those that are thirsty.
Yeah, exactly.
That's really good.
That's beautiful.
Thanks a lot, Dan. Before we close, anybody who wants to get in touch with you, I will leave the link to your LinkedIn in the profile in the show notes. But what's the best place to find you, find your content, learn more about what you do?
Yeah, definitely LinkedIn. That's the only place that I'm frequently, consistently showing up. It's enough for me right now. But yeah, head over to LinkedIn and join my newsletter. There's a link on there to join my newsletter and say hello. Yeah, Dan Bentley online, I think the tag is, yeah.
Awesome. Dan, this was absolutely amazing. I really enjoyed the conversation. Thanks a lot for joining us. Thanks a lot
Cheers,
to
friend. Cheers,
anybody
Dana.
who tuned in live with us and those listening to the recording.
Yeah, thanks so much, Dan. It was a real pleasure. And thank you to everyone who joined us live on LinkedIn today. And if not, probably on YouTube.
Wonderful. Thanks, everyone.
See you all next week.